maybe it's best in a way that we don't fully understand what life is about till the end, because we need different traits at different times. Whether you're 18, you're an idealistic soldier, whether you're 30 and want to run for office because you think you can change the country, or whether you're 72 and you have a 4.5-year-old daughter you're trying to provide for her life. What matters the most is how many people you have helped and to what degree in the end. Nice guys may finish last, but they finish well. The people you help, they are your immortality.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Author Spotlight brought to you by Apex Media Global. I'm your host, Monica, and today we're just honored with the presence of a man who's lived several lives in one. He's a fisherman, a scholar, a lawyer, and a writer. Ed Gentle has spent 3 decades in the courtroom just battling complex legal battles. But beyond the courtroom, he's also a writer navigating life's chaos. His books, Pond Mountain Tales, Bass Bombs, Prank Ideals, and Amateur Gunplay just weave together truth, wisdom, and humor, much like life itself. So, Ed, thank you so much for joining us today.
My great pleasure.
Ed, I know I gave an overview, like a slight overview of what you do, but I don't think it does it justice. So I want to ask you, Ed, who is Ed Gentle? Because you do a lot of things. How would you introduce yourself?
I think the two most important aspects of my life are my family and my fishing. I have 4 children. I have 3 that are grown, but I'm blessed with a 4.5-year-old, very beautiful daughter, a lanyap as I get older. So the truth is, I have a lot more knowledge, I think, of how to raise children now that I'm in my 70s than I did when I was in my 20s and took a run at it with my 3 sons. So I think my 4-year-old has given me a second chance at being a great father, which I'm working on very, very hard. And it's been a blessing, and she keeps me centered. When life gets too chaotic, I have my Alex. Also, my first wife, Jan, we had 3 sons together, and now I have this wonderful daughter. And so I think my wife, Jan, feels like her life is more whole too. So the family piece is the centerpiece of my life. I'm also a fisherman, but I'm kind of an unusual fisherman. I'm what's called a drop shot fisherman. I use small weights and I fish very slowly, and that compares to the bubbas that's how you characterize most fishermen. They use bigger baits. They're in a hurry, and they go up and down the lake at 65 miles an hour. Of course, it's hard for a fish to bite your lure when you're going that fast. And so what I do is I take my time. I use smaller baits, and I finesse the issue. I am a lawyer, and I practice law to help the vulnerable. It also feeds my family and also my fishing habit.
Wow. Um, I mean, I just have so many questions just from your answer there. I wanted to start with young Alex, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me asking this, but I'm not a parent myself, and it's always good to kind of know a thing or two about parenting. I think it would help me with life in general and just navigating through relationships. But what are like, do you still learn new things about parenting with Alex?
I really do. So she's a savant. She's on the spectrum, but she's 4.5 and can count to 200.
Wow.
She memorizes books. She can spell, and we have a lot of courses each week. For example, on Saturdays we have a UAB professor who teaches early childhood education. Teach Alex for 4 hours from 8 to noon, and Alex pays attention the whole time, which I think that you and I probably could not do. So
No.
she's profoundly smart, and I think what will happen, she's going to be mainstream in kindergarten. She'll know everything already, but she'll see a different method of it being taught, and I think that'll keep her attention, just her curiosity. So she's really a whole different lens on life I'm experiencing.
Wow. What's your favorite book aside from yours?
Brown bear, brown bear. What do you see? I see a black sheep looking at me, but that's not enough for her. And then she'll do little sidebars. Then she'll go, "Bob, Bob, black sheep, have you any wool?" She's always side commenting and side singing, and she makes up songs. And she's also very fast. I think she may be a runner like I was back in the day. It's hard for me to catch her when she runs around the front yard or the house. So I think that's a good sign.
Oh my God. I mean, what a joy to be with her. Um,
And she's stunningly
but
beautiful.
I can imagine. But you're so lucky to have her and she's so lucky to have you. I feel like you guys would learn a lot from each other. I mean, she seems very smart. Um, but I also wanted to talk about your fishing. I also don't know
Okay.
anything about fishing, so I think I would
Okay.
learn a lot from you. But you
Sure.
said that you do it slowly. Is
Right.
it like, why did you decide to do it? Does it like speak about your character and how you approach things? Or is it just about
Well,
fishing?
first of all, I began to fish when I was 2 years old. My dad would take my two older sisters and me fishing. He would get up early in the morning. He would put their pants on backwards because he didn't know you zip them in the back, you know. And so we didn't have much money. We would stop by a creek with what's called a seine, a net, and seine minnows to use as bait. And so we would do this many, many Saturday mornings. And when I first started fishing, I didn't know what a fish looked like. So I asked my dad about it. And I was very frustrated. He says, "Well, it looks kind of like a little plate, and it's got little prickly things sticking out. But you'll know." And I just had to wait and see. So since then, it's been not only a family tradition, but it's been a source of peace with me, kind of a time out in this crazy world we live in, and a time to reflect, and frankly, a lot of times to create.
I can imagine how much peace it would bring you just to like steady and ground yourself. I mean, just your profession, being a lawyer alone, I could imagine that it's often complicated and emotional and just mentally taxing. And I wanted to ask you, like, how has that experience shaped your storytelling? Because you mentioned that it's also a lot of time for creating when you fish.
It is, and so some of the stories that I've written have come from my practice. For example, in Pond Mountain Tales, the story about when Lawrence became Lazarus is a story of my trying to make peace in a very difficult settlement. We had 18,000 claimants, 90% were black, and they have PCBs in their body, and you can't get them out. And not only that, they cross the placenta into the next generation. So they're very angry, and the defendants weren't there. I was there as the claims administrator for the court, and I was the object of their wrath because I was handy. So what I did to build peace is that I did at the time, three bass lakes, and on the weekends they come over to my house and fish. I would feed them and talk to them and befriend them, and it took the heat out of the case. It helped really make peace. So the story about Lawrence is that so many a time we'd have these claimant parties. We'd have maybe 200 claimants, and they have the lima bean test. If the fish is the size of the lima bean, they keep it and eat it because it's, I guess it's subsistence fishing. But, we would fish all Saturday. So it's getting late in the evening. The sun's starting to get low on the horizon. And we couldn't find him. And I found that it looked like he had maybe slipped into the water, and we found his fishing pole floating. So we got in a panic looking for him, calling out, "Lawrence, Lawrence." So we asked the sheriff to come over with his frogmen. They're strapping up and putting on their snorkeling gear. And then Lawrence came back up over the hill. Apparently, Lawrence had just had to go relieve himself. So after that, we called him Lazarus.
How long was that? Just like that period? Because you guys are panicking. He was just like chilling. How long was that period?
About an hour, but luckily
What?
Lawrence reappeared. Yeah, I think he got turned around. This particular piece of land, it was 200 acres, and I think he got turned around and was heading back into the wilderness area. And I think he might have heard us yelling
Mm.
his name and came back.
But he knew his way back. Like he wasn't
Well, he did,
panicking
I
at
think,
all.
from the yelling.
Yeah. He
Lawrence,
just had to
Lawrence.
follow it. Yeah. That's a funny story.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's a blend of law and story.
yeah, and you also mentioned that you make sense of life's chaos when you write. And can you think of a moment or can you take us back to a moment where like your writing became a form of clarity, like, and it healed you?
I think so. I think another good example is if you look at amateur gunplay, the first story is about my friend Billy. Billy was a linebacker at Auburn, and I ran track, and we were roommates. And so But before we became roommates, he lived with another student who had broken up with his wife, and she took up with a dentist, and they would call his friend late at night while they were having sex. And it would anger anybody, right? So he got more and more angry, and so Billy, to keep him quiet, because Billy was an engineering major, he wants him quiet to study. He told him, he said, "Why don't you just go over there and kill him? Go take care of him so I could study." And so the guy said, "Well, that's a great idea. How should I do it?" So Billy said, "You should strangle them so you could look them in the eyes." And so what happened, lo and behold, that's what happened eventually, is that, one day, Billy's roommate no longer complained about his wife, and the calls from the dentist and the wife ceased. And maybe a week later, the sheriff's deputies found the two bodies in his friend's trunk of his car. And when they interviewed the murder suspect, he said, I strangled them because Billy said I should look them in the eyes when I'm killing them. And so Billy became a murder suspect. A sheriff's deputy would hang out with Billy, go to breakfast with him. Finally, they gave up, and the guy went on to prison. And so I said, Billy, how do you make sense of this? She must have been the most beautiful woman to drive him to this wrath. And Billy says, no, she wasn't Helen of Troy. She was very ugly. And so that's the punchline. And so really, you kind of maybe try to make sense of craziness with some humor.
Yeah. I mean, I think crazy is an understatement. I love it that you're laughing. Laughing it out. Um,
And,
but
yeah, and
but
so what happened is finally the guy got out of he would get out on work release. He'd work at the McDonald's or whatever. He finally got out. And so he called Billy and said, "Billy, do you want to hang out?" And Billy said, "No." Just more humor. So
yeah, no, that's crazy. But like aside from the humor, right? Uh, like just the complicated cases, like very conflicting ones. And I know fishing is a big part of, you self-regulating, but when you're in the moment and you can't go and fish, how do you deal with the stress? That's what I'm actually really curious about.
yeah, I think about my family. For example, when I do my billing each month, I have lots of pictures of Alex when I do my bills, so I try not to write them off because I'm working for her. So what you try to do is to keep a balance and try to realize, the purpose of all of our lives, I think, is to help others. And so if you've done that in a day, you've had a good day. And the good thing about what we do is a lot of our firm activity is to pay victims money. And that gives you a lot of psychic income to really pay the money. You also get to listen not just to their story, but their story. That is, they tell you what's happened to them, how you've helped their life with
Mm,
with finally paying them, and they get closure because a lot of times it's not just paying them, but recognizing their injury and that it was caused by a certain defendant. It gives them
mm,
closure because, as you know, in law, the approach of the defendants is always to deny everything to the end, which
mm.
is not very encouraging to a victim.
Wow. I really want to talk about your books, but just like your profession and everything that you do is just a fascination to me and just how you deal with things um like how you were talking about story, right? Story, people just
Yes,
telling their stories to you. But as a
yes.
lawyer, I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like you have to be really objective sometimes and like take the emotion out. That's what I would assume,
Well,
and you can correct me.
well, I think in many instances that's true. I do work for the court, and the court, as you know, is neutral and objective and fair to everybody.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's very important to have empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the victim, but also, frankly, for the defendant, because a lot of times the defendant finds itself in a situation which is not completely fair. Example, in the PCB cases we've talked about in Aniston, where we had the Lawrence story, uh, Monsanto for many, many years made PCBs and they were thought to be fine. There was no government regulation condemning them, and they were very useful in different situations. And so Monsanto was trying to be a good steward, of a good product. And then over time, the research developed and was found to be a not so great product. But in the meantime, Monsanto had made all these PCBs. They're out in the environment, and there they were. And so Is that fair? Probably not. In fact, they went into chapter 11. I think there are two perspectives. And that's one thing being a neutral like I am helps you see, and it helps you in life to
Mhm.
understand that I may have one point of view, but it's not the point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And how you talked about empathy. How do you have empathy with boundaries and staying neutral, but also not cold? That's a
It's
hard
it's
one.
tough. It's tough,
Yeah.
and sometimes you got to take a break.
Yeah.
So, you can
Um,
only listen to so many victims without it really getting to you. And just as another example, in the PCB cases, the community was very angry. When I was first hired by Judge Clement, a federal judge who had the case, we had three town meetings. They each had about 5,000 people, and we had two microphones, and they'd line up and tell us, what their complaints were, how they thought we should allocate the money. And those are three very, very difficult days because
mm,
you can't turn that off after you talk with the people. It's real. So you're right. It's very tough to keep a balance of being both neutral and empathetic.
exactly. So I guess fishing could really help. But it's really fascinating to me, like talking to people who are emotionally intelligent and who know how to have a good time and laugh, but also be really serious and empathetic, but have their boundaries. So yeah. But now let's talk about your books. Let's talk about each
Okay.
one, actually.
Okay.
Pond Mountain Tales, Amateur Gunplay, Pranked Ideals, Bass Bombs. They all have like a distinct tone and lesson. But how do they connect to different stages of your own life?
I don't know if there's stages but they're dimensions of my life. Just like we all have aspects of our life at any moment. There's some great joyous ones and then there's some difficult ones. So what I've done in these books, I think, is to try to compartmentalize the peace part. So Pond Mountain Tales is more of a reflective uh, thought about really a golden time when I had my family all in one spot. We were out in the country, so my teenagers they couldn't get into too much trouble, and they're kind of trapped. They had to talk to my wife and me, which is great. And so that's a very golden time. Amateur gunplay was really precipitated by my actually being one of the victims in the 10 stories. I had a gun put to the back of my head, and of course, I gave my wallet and I told them they could take my car or whatever they wanted to do. And so that helped me focus on how much a situation involving a gun can change your life forever. At that time, I'd already had my Billy story, so I had two great stories to get started. And so once you have the beginning of a book, sometimes the book just takes over. With Pranked Ideals, it's more about my idealism in youth and how it faced reality, as you try to get through life. To make money, a lot of times we have to do some compromising. And
Mm,
so I guess my favorite story in that book is about the charter boats. So I studied the charter boat is a boat that you charter, you pay them money to go out and catch fish, and you go out with them and catch the fish. But in Miami, where I studied them, there was some chicanery going on, I guess I could say. When you got on a charter boat, the first thing the captain asks is if you want a mount of fish. That is, you get the fish stuffed and put it in your living room. If you don't want to do that, then they figure they can't make much money on you because they get a deposit on the mounting. So they troll the baits a little bit too fast. You can't tell the difference, but you don't catch anything. If you say you're going to mount a fish, then they're very careful to get you excited about it and to make sure they can get you to put down your 30% deposit, which may be like $6,000 for a 10-foot shark. So they first thing they do, they want to get the fish excited. They put some dead fish in a bucket in the back, and it has a blood trail. So a shark will come up and bite the boat and shake the boat a little bit. That'll get you excited. And then they feed the bait to the shark, and they hook him, and they hand you the pole, and you're off to the races. He pulls and pulls, and you yank him and try to reel him in. They go, "Oh, you've got jaws. He's so beautiful. Look at him jump," or whatever. So you get him in close, and they put a bang stick to his head. It's like a shotgun shell. You put him in the boat. He's not quite dead, though. He thrashes around, knocks the furniture around. You have to go up to the flying bridge, the upper part of the boat, so it doesn't get you. And then the captain says something like, "That's the most magnificent, beautiful shark I've seen in many, many months. He's very, very big for these waters. Don't you think you should memorialize this experience with a trophy?" And of course, the answer is Yes. And so they get their 30% down. And then as you fly back to New Jersey from your vacation in Florida, you think, do I really want a 12-foot shark in my living room? No. And so you cancel the order. But in the meantime, the captain's got his 30%. He's happy. And so
Mm.
they reel you in this way. And so one day I would come down and ask the customers various things with a questionnaire and compiling my master's thesis. So there's a big tiger shark hanging from the yard arm, over the dock. And there's one of the captains trying to sell the next day's fishing. He said, "When you like to catch jaws, isn't he beautiful? This is your opportunity." And tiger sharks take a long time to die. The tiger shark reached over and bit him in the rear, and I thought, that's taking a bite out of crime. So
Wow.
again, more humor.
Yeah, that's quite a story. Ed, I gotta ask another question again. Like every time you talk, I'm like, I have a question and question. And humor. Humor feels like it's a big part of how you navigate through life too. But I I guess it's just probably me projecting, but you could tell me. When you like with your profession, like, dealing with complex like legal battles, how do you still find the time to find humor?
I think it's not just finding the time for humor. It's humor keeps you going.
Mm.
For example, later today I've got a call with about 40 lawyers in a case, and they're arguing about how to do depositions, which means you ask people questions and you have them typed up by a court reporter. And so they've gone back and forth on how they're going to do this. And so in the end, now they're fighting over when one side has to stop asking questions. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke the Cousin Cliff rule. This is from Alabama when I was a kid. Cousin Cliff would come to your birthday party and do magic tricks and that sort of thing. And if you interrupted him, he would say, "That'll cost you $1." And we would be quiet. We didn't know what it meant. So what I'm going to tell these lawyers is, once we have an agreed number of questions, after that, each question will cost you the Cousin Cliff rule $1,000.
Oh,
And there'll be a little bit of laughter, but I think it's fair. So a lot of times you try to navigate through life with comedy, but you try to be as fair as you can in the meantime.
yeah. Wow. That's honestly a lesson for me too.
Well, for all of
Yeah.
us, really, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because I gotta be honest, just to be a little bit vulnerable, like younger people feel like they have to put on this certain persona, like they cannot laugh and they cannot have humor because they might seem unprofessional. And
I think
just
that's
looking,
right.
yeah, but looking at someone like you who has had success and still finds the time to laugh, or maybe not find the time to laugh, but just laugh, it's validating. So it's good.
Well, part of it is just learning not to take yourself seriously. And like I
Yeah.
began this interview, I think I'm better able to raise my Alex because I'm older and don't take things so seriously. With my three sons, because I was an athlete in college, I wanted
Mm.
them all to be athletes, which is the wrong approach. I've got one that's an athlete. I've got one that's a great writer. I've got one that delivers pizza, and they need to be themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think in the end, that's a great life's lesson is that you have to be humble. We don't have the answers. In fact, the answers keep changing daily. And so we just
Yeah.
have to navigate as best we can.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think our viewers would also find value in that. But now I wanted to go back to your books.
Okay.
So in Prank's Ideals, you were talking about kind of like illusions and just, being a young person. So how, like, was there a time in your life where it clicked, like just the glass shattered and there was like the illusion shattered?
Yeah. Yeah, there was. It's the Joe died story. So it's really about
Mm.
two Joes. I'll just tell about the one Joe. So I was working at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia as a park ranger in the summer when I was in college, one summer. And one thing we would do as young rangers, we do rescues. There are a lot of waterfalls in the park, and people would fall off the waterfall, and sometimes with horrible results. So one night, in what's called White Oak Canyon, we got the call to go out and rescue some folks like at 2 a.m. in the morning. So it turned out we got there, and it was a teenager, underaged. All he had five friends. There was a lot of beer cans around, and apparently they'd been drinking. And he fell off the waterfall. And frankly, I mean, I'm sorry to be a little bit gross, but there was a rib coming out of his body. And we had a pallet, and I was a runner back then, and we ran him to the road and took him to the hospital, and he didn't make it. But he would have made it. You know, you're familiar with the golden hour. So when someone's really seriously hurt, you have about an hour really to save them. What had happened is those his five quote friends had waited to sober up before they called. And so he had fallen like maybe 3 hours before, and we could have saved him. And so then when that happened, I asked my park ranger supervisor, shouldn't we prosecute those five guys?
Mm.
And the answer was that would hurt the image of the park. And so after that, I decided I would not be a park ranger. So that was a moment of enlightenment. And so
Wow.
the punchline of that story is I've never been so drunk since Joe died. And that's what I wished on those five guys through life. They would think about their friend Joe, who they let die over drinking.
Do you know what happened to them?
I don't.
Mm. Well, I hope they didn't get drunk since Joe died. But
Same here.
yeah.
The other side of that story, the other Joe was my supervisor, an older lawyer who, frankly, was greedy. And I had a wife, three kids, and a mortgage. I needed some money, but he would keep most of the money. But he put in his will, he left me $20,000 to have a party for him. And in the will, he said, I want to have a party. And people say, I've never been so drunk since Joe died. And so that's the other, it's like an entendre, right? There's two
Yeah.
Joe Dies in the story. So that's the other piece of the story.
Yeah. Wow. Um, well, I also wanted to talk about amateur gunplay. You briefly mentioned like your own experience and I like how did you navigate what happened?
Yeah, well, I was dating a girl, and I had gone to her house and brought some groceries, and I just got ambushed, and
Mm,
so they put a gun to my head, and I gave them my wallet, and I got out of there. Later on, though, I found the wallet and had my ID and all. They had just taken the money, so it could have been worse, and I survived. But
yeah.
it certainly changed my point of view about how every minute counts in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So your stories and your books, they're inspired by real events, your own personal events or stories that you've heard. But were there moments where you like felt maybe I have to hold back some parts or maybe leave it some fictionalized?
Oh, you always do. I think all
Mm,
writers do that. And
mm,
also, you may maybe highlight some aspects of someone that are not really that grotesque or that salient, to make your point. And also, I think you feel some sense of loyalty, especially if it involves your friends.
mm.
And so it's a mix.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you another question before I move on to a segment called What Would Ed Do? But
Okay.
um, I do have a lot of questions and it might be like a 10-hour conversation, so I would save you from that. But just to wrap it all up, what is one question that you would hope someone would ask you?
Yeah, I guess one question would be, what would you do differently?
Yeah,
Right?
that's one of
Yeah,
my
that.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you answer
So
it?
I think all you can say is that I don't know if I would. Looking back, I try to do the best I could at the time based upon what I knew. And it's really hard to Monday morning quarterback yourself. And it's probably not healthy psychologically. So I think all in all, I don't think I would change anything.
But if you had the chance to talk to like the 30-year-old Ed, what would you tell him?
Well, you know what? I don't know if I'd want to tell him. what's down the road.
Ah,
Because
spoilers.
if you're 72, you're trying to think about, do I have enough money for Alex to, get her PhD one day and that sort of thing. And when you're 30, you think you can change the world. And so maybe it's best in a way that we don't fully understand what life is about till the end, because we need different
Mm.
traits at different times. Whether you're 18, you're an idealistic soldier, whether you're 30 and want to run for office because you think you can change the country, or whether you're 72 and you have a 4.5-year-old daughter you're trying to provide for her life.
Do you think that you still deal with illusions every day?
We all do. For
Yeah.
example, a couple of things. One, we each think we're the most important person in the world. Two,
Yeah.
we think we'll never die.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What is something that you would want to write about next?
Well, I think I'm going to write about Alex. I haven't really done that. I'm still collecting data,
Aw.
but yeah, I think she deserves that, because
What do
one
you have?
thing, what one,
Mhm.
one thing writing does is it immortalizes the people you write about,
Yeah.
because writing's forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like as long as there are people in the world, there will always be readers and art will never die. And I just think authors are doing the world a favor by keep writing. Um,
And
yeah,
we
and
do
I think
ourselves a
Alex,
favor because it keeps you
yeah,
sane. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so I wanted to ask you a couple of questions and
Okay.
maybe not what would you do differently, but just what would you do in these scenarios. So I call it what would Ed do? I have sample scenarios and I just want to ask, what would Ed do?
Okay.
So my first question is, you've spent a lifetime just chasing both truth and stillness, like in courtrooms or just fishing in the open water. And when the noise of life just feels too loud and you feel kind of imbalanced, what would you do?
Well, what I do is I think about Alex a lot. I think about some things I've accomplished in my life and what my legacy may be. And
Mm.
so I think it helps you realize that the moment is not as critical as the overall path.
Mm. What would your legacy look like?
I think my major legacy is my 4 children,
Mm.
and
That's
maybe all the victims we paid, maybe all the
mm.
victims.
That's beautiful. Okay, second question. Let's say you're writing a story. Like you mentioned a while ago, sometimes you start it and sometimes the book finishes the story. So let's say you're writing a story and it refuses to end neatly. Like maybe the hero is flawed or just there's no redeeming factor. Do you tie it up just to get it over with or let the truth stay messy? What would Ed do?
Well, I think the end has to be messy because of the characters. So a good example is in Bass Bums. So it
Mm,
involves really two very flawed fishermen who both cheat in tournaments. And it's sort of silly to cheat in a tournament because you're just talking about a few $100s, but it's about ego, and it just doesn't make any sense to me anyway. But what happened is that, they were both cheating on each other. One would disconnect the guy's trailer for his boat from his truck, so he tried to pull it and it'd roll down the hill. Another might nick the fishing line on each of the other's poles, so when he tries to set the hook, the line breaks. So what I had them do is they encountered each other on the water. Each had a boat. They ran into each other. They started fighting. One took a flare gun and shot it into the bottom of the other guy's boat. It exploded. The thing burned, and it took a while for it to burn down. And so finally, the sheriff's deputy could get at it, and he looked what was going on there, and he saw the two bodies, and they're grasping each other, holding each other like lovers. And so the sheriff's deputy said, "Crime of passion." So it's just sort of like a double entendre, right? They actually love each other. They're both evil, right? So. Maybe they frolicked in each other's evilness.
Oh God, that's what I wasn't sure if I was supposed to laugh or like be concerned, but that
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Kind of like life. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, let the truth stay messy. I guess that's just life, like life itself.
Yeah.
Um,
And also, it wouldn't be credible
mm,
if it always ends up unmessy.
yeah, yeah. Okay, next question is, you've won a big case, but it doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like victory. What would Ed do to find meaning in the success that feels hollow?
Well, almost always there is something, there's a good takeaway from resolving a case. The bleeding end, so to speak, a great incentive to resolve cases is legal bills. Lawyers are not cheap, and so finally the bills have stopped for the defendant. Usually, the defendant lives to fight another day. It's not extinguished like in a bankruptcy. Sometimes it's not true, but usually, and always, almost always, the plaintiff, the person who's the victim here, does not get made whole, but maybe they're vindicated somehow. So maybe they're damaged to the tune of X, but they get a half X, but that comes from the defendant. And also, sometimes to gild the lily, so to speak, the defendant will give an apology. That happened, for example, in the Monsanto case in Anniston with the PCB victims. That went a long way to try to close the case in a meaningful way, even though to some extent the money was hollow because it was not enough.
Mm. But if it was you, how would you just deal with it?
I think you think about the arc of your life and all the times you've resolved things in a very meaningful way. You don't do that every time. And so
Mm,
you just think, well, by and large, we're doing a good job here. Some things slip through,
yeah.
and so I think that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Again, let the truth stay messy. That's just
Yeah, it's
life.
a little bit messy. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question is, you think of a friend and in your memory they suddenly become a villain. You just maybe an illusion, right? It just clicks like, oh, this person did that to me. Do you rewrite the story or let it stand as it is? What would Ed do?
Yeah, I think that's very true in life. You learn about different layers of people as you get to know them, and sometimes you're disappointed. For example, you may know a politician is very idealistic, but you can see he's Machiavellian and trying to get his or her way. I think to some extent you just let it be what it is, and I think we all have some villainy in ourselves, and we're all heroes to our heroines. So you just have to let it be what it is, and you really can't. I don't think you can soften it.
Mm, yeah, I guess some people, and by some people, I mean maybe sometimes myself, just like ruminate and just sometimes you just gotta let it be. I think that's the
That's
story
right.
that, yeah, that's
Don't
the lesson
overthink it.
that's echoing. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's right.
Um, yeah. Okay, last question of this segment, or I guess last question overall. If life itself was a closing argument and you had one final story left to tell about just what mattered most, what would Ed say or do?
What matters the most is how many people you have helped and to what degree in the end.
Mm.
Nice guys may finish last, but they finish well. The people you help, they are your immortality.
Well said. You are a writer, Ed, and you're a speaker. And I like it's such a joy to speak to you. It's a breath of fresh air, and anyone who's surrounded by you and your little Alex and your children are very lucky to have you in their presence. And before I let you go, where can our viewers find your books?
Yeah, so I've got a website. It's called edgargentle.com. Very simple. EDGARGENTLE.com.
Great. We'll also link it in our description below, Edgar
Great.
Gentle. So Ed, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed our conversation, your wisdom, your humor, and I would really hope to speak to you soon when you decide to write a book about Alex, maybe. But
We
yeah,
will.
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really sure that our viewers find a lot of value and wisdom in our conversation today. And to our viewers, I say, let it stay messy and don't overthink it. And until next time. This has been Monica. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you.